My name is Paula Barnes, 28 years old. The sound of the champagne cork popping echoed through the marble living room like a gunshot. My mother gasped, then clapped delighted, while a stream of golden liquid sprayed across her pristine white carpet. My brother Ryan threw his head back laughing, holding the bottle high as if he'd just conquered the world. $2 million, he announced proudly, like an actor delivering the climax of a film. That's what Hendricks Group is paying for Barnes Industries. Not bad for a struggling company, huh? Dad clapped him on the back, his smile wide, his pride overflowing. You saved us from bankruptcy, son. Brilliant negotiation. I sat quietly on the sofa, laptop open, pretending to type. The screen showed the real story numbers that told a truth no one here wanted to see. Barnes Industries wasn't failing. In fact, it was preparing for its most profitable year in company history. But in this house, facts had never mattered as much as theatrics. Mom dabbed her eyes with a napkin. My brilliant boy, she said, always knowing exactly what to do. Her gaze flicked toward me, and the warmth in her voice froze to ice. Paula, aren't you going to congratulate your brother? I didn't look up. Congratulations, Ryan. Ryan smirked. Don't sound too enthusiastic, sis. I know it's tough, but someone had to save the company. And hey, maybe the new owners will keep you on as an assistant or something. You're cheap labor. Nicole, our sister, forever lounging and lovely, snickered from the armchair, swirling her champagne. She's probably jealous, Ryan. Not everyone gets to be the hero. I forced a smile. No, not everyone does. Dad chuckled, oblivious or unwilling to see the sting behind my words. Come on, Paula. You've done well in accounting, but Ryan's been running the company for years. He knows the big picture. The big picture, I said, softly closing my laptop. You mean the one where we sell a profitable company for 30% less than it's worth? The room went silent for a second. Then Ryan's laugh broke it sharp and condescending. Always about numbers with you, huh? Business isn't just spreadsheets, it's instinct, vision, something you've never had. I met his eyes. Vision is knowing the difference between leadership and luck. Mom's tone snapped like a whip. Enough, Paula. Tonight is about your brother. Try to be supportive. Supportive. That word had followed me since childhood like a leash around my neck. Supportive meant silent. Supportive meant invisible. I stood folding my laptop under my arm. I should get back to the office, I said. Some of us still have work to do. It's Sunday, Nicole said with a laugh. God, Paula, do you ever stop? Someone has to keep the books accurate, I murmured, heading toward the door. Ryan's voice followed me, teasing and smug. Not for much longer, sis. Fricks has their own accounting team. I didn't turn back. Let them have their champagne and their false victory. Outside, the cool air hit me like relief. I drove the 15 minutes to the industrial park where Barnes Industries sat in darkness. The building loomed quiet and still under the streetlights, mine alone for now. I unlocked my office, the faint smell of metal and paper greeting me. Inside my locked cabinet, beneath financial reports and old files, was the folder that held everything they didn't know. I spread the papers across my desk. Stock certificates, trust documents, signatures in neat ink. The truth stared back at me. 50% ownership, gifted to me by James Whitmore, my father's late business partner. The man I'd called Uncle James. He'd taught me everything Dad never did. Balance sheets, market forecasting, quiet patience. He once told me real power doesn't shout Paula, it waits. When he died, he left me half the company, but the shares stayed in trust until I turned 25. 3 years ago, they became mine. And 2 years ago, I'd gone further. Through a quiet purchase from an early investor's estate, I'd acquired another 21%. My name wasn't on any of it, not directly, but the control was absolute. 71%. The majority. They thought they were selling their company in 3 days. I smiled faintly at the absurdity. They were celebrating my loss, but they were actually handing me my moment. My phone buzzed, a message from Ryan. Hey, Dad wants you to prepare the full disclosure for Herrick's by Wednesday. Everything. Don't leave anything out. I typed back. Of course, I'll make sure it's thorough. Then I leaned back in my chair, staring out at the empty factory floor through the glass wall. The machines stood silent, waiting like I had been for years. They thought I was invisible. They were wrong. The next morning, the hum of the office felt different. Too still, too quiet. The kind of quiet that came before a storm. I arrived before sunrise, as always. It had become a habit, a survival instinct, maybe. The early hours were the only time I could breathe before the noise of my family's egos filled the building. Coffee in one hand, I unlocked my office and sat down at my desk. The folder from last night lay open like a confession, waiting to be read again. The ink on the stock certificates gleamed under the fluorescent lights. 71%. I whispered the number to myself. It sounded powerful, dangerous, liberating. The first 50% had come from James Whitmore, my father's college friend and co-founder of Barnes Industries. Uncle James, I'd called him since childhood. He was the kind of man who noticed quiet people who understood that silence could mean focus, not weakness. When I was 12, I used to sit in his home office while he worked. He'd hand me spare calculators and ask if we double production and cut costs by 5%, what happens to our margins? I'd scribble the answer, and he'd smile. You think like a strategist, not an accountant. Dad never said things like that. When James died of a heart attack 8 years ago, I thought the light went out in this company. But he'd been planning something all along. His will left me half the company held in trust until I turned 25. To Paula, it read for her patience, her integrity, and her vision. Vision, the word Ryan used like a joke. When the trust transferred to me 3 years ago, I said nothing. Not even to Marcus, not even to my mother. Silence had protected me for this long. But I hadn't stopped there. 2 years ago, I learned that the Wilson family early investors were liquidating assets after Gerald Wilson's passing. I bought their 21% stake quietly through a holding company with no trace of my name. By the time Ryan was appointed COO, the family thought they owned the empire Dad built. They didn't realize I'd already taken the crown. A bitter laugh escaped me. They'd spent their lives lecturing me about hard work and respect. Yet the only one who earned this company was the one they dismissed. At 7:30 a.m., I began creating 2 sets of financial reports, one for the Hendricks Group, another for myself. The first showed what Ryan wanted them to see: a company in decline. Margins, shrinking market share, eroding product stagnation. I didn't lie. I just selected the darkest numbers, colored the truth with shadows. The second showed what I knew: soaring growth, pending contracts, patents under review. A company ready to triple its value in under 2 years. I glanced at the calendar. Wednesday disclosure day. The day I'd hand Ryan the rope he'd use to hang himself. My office phone buzzed. Paula came, Dad's voice heavy with that fake warmth. Can you come to my office? We need to discuss your position after the sale. I walked into his office and froze. The walls were lined with framed photos of Ryan shaking hands with clients, Ryan at trade shows, Ryan receiving awards. Not a single picture of me. Dad gestured for me to sit. Hendricks Group wants a smooth transition. Ryan will step down as COO. I'll retire. You'll stay on for 6 months to manage the books during integration. They've agreed to keep you at your current salary, $58,000. 62, I corrected quietly. I got a raise last year. He waved a hand. Right. Anyway, after 6 months, it'll depend on whether they retain your role or consolidate accounting. So I'll probably be unemployed. He smiled kindly, patronizingly. You'll find something else. You're young. This might be good for you, Paula. A fresh start. You've been in Ryan's shadow long enough. I bit back a laugh. You put me there, Dad. He frowned. Don't start. You chose accounting. Ryan's been groomed for leadership since day one. That's how families work. No, I said, standing. That's how favoritism works. He sighed. Paula, we're doing what's best for the family. For the family, I repeated, my voice steady. Just not for me. When I returned to my office, my hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was adrenaline. I opened a locked drawer and pulled out a framed photo. Uncle James and I standing in front of the factory when I was 21. The day he'd told me, when the moment comes, don't hesitate. They'll never hand you power, you'll have to take it. That moment was coming. At noon, I emailed Ryan the official financial report, the fake one that mirrored his delusions. He replied instantly, Perfect. Sending this to Hendricks now. Thanks, sis. Maybe you can be useful after all. I stared at the message, then deleted it. By evening, I sat in the darkened office, the hum of machinery distant. In 3 days, my family would walk into a boardroom thinking they were selling Barnes Industries. In truth, they were walking into their own reckoning. And this time I wouldn't be silent. By Tuesday morning, the building felt alive again, but not in a good way. There was a current of unease running through every corridor, like everyone could sense something wasn't right but couldn't name it. People whispered over coffee machines, watched Ryan strut past with fake confidence, and looked at me like I might have answers. I didn't. Not yet. At least not ones I could share. By 6 a.m., I was already at my desk finalizing the 2 reports, one for them, one for me. Each number was a weapon. Each omission, a bullet. It was strange how calm I felt, knowing everything was about to change. When the sun crept through the blinds, I caught my reflection in the office window. Same tired eyes, same quiet face, everyone underestimated. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt ready. At 9 a.m., the familiar rhythm of Dad's shoes sounded down the hall. He didn't knock before entering. He never did. Paula, he said in his usual commanding tone, Ryan's calling a meeting later this week with the Hendricks team. I need you to have the final files printed, summarized, and ready for review by Thursday morning. Already done, I replied without looking up. He hesitated, clearly thrown off by my composure. Good. That's efficient. Then he added with a forced chuckle, You always were reliable, even if you don't really see the strategic side. I smiled faintly. Oh, I see the strategic side just fine. He didn't ask what I meant. He never did. When he left, the silence returned, and with it my thoughts of James Whitmore. Uncle James had been more than a mentor. He was the only one who'd ever made me believe I was capable of leading. I remembered one evening years ago in his office. He'd been reviewing annual statements, glasses slipping down his nose. Paula, he said, your father sees business as a war to win. But you, he looked at me over the rim of his glasses, you see it as a structure to perfect. That's rarer than you think. He'd been right. Now, standing in my father's empire, I realized how broken his structure had become. Ryan's impulsive decisions, Mom's blind praise, Dad's outdated instincts, it was all crumbling, and they didn't even know who was holding the foundation together. Around noon, I walked through the production floor. The machines thudded rhythmically, a sound that had once comforted me. The workers nodded when I passed, polite but distant. To them, I was the quiet Barnes, the one who handled numbers and stayed out of trouble. None of them knew the truth. But one man did notice. Paula. I turned. It was Marcus Chin, our lead engineer. His sleeves rolled up, safety goggles perched on his head. He looked worried. I heard rumors, he said in a low voice. Is it true Ryan's selling the company? Looks like it, I said. He frowned. That's insane. The M-Series sensors are about to land the Tecton contract. If that closes, we'll be worth 4 times what Fricks is offering. I know. Then why isn't anyone stopping him? I gave a humorless smile. Because they think they can. Marcus stepped closer, his tone urgent. You've always seen through the numbers. You know this isn't right. Tell your dad. Make them listen. They won't. He looked at me for a long time, and in that moment I saw it, the trust, the quiet belief that I was more than what my family made me out to be. Then do something, he said finally. I hesitated, then said softly, Come by the office on Thursday, 3 p.m. You might want to see what happens. He frowned, confused but curious. Paula, what are you planning? Let's just say, I replied, I'm finally taking Uncle James's advice. That night, as I packed up, I found myself drawn back to my father's office. The door was ajar. Inside, I could hear him talking to Mom on speakerphone. She doesn't understand how the world works, Carol, he was saying. She's not built for leadership, never was. Always too cautious, too quiet. Ryan's the one with vision. Mom's voice floated through the speaker, weary but indulgent. I know, she's just jealous. Let's not ruin Ryan's big week by letting her bitterness get to us. I froze outside the door, hands clenched. I should have felt angry, but what I felt instead was clarity. Their words confirmed what I'd always known. No matter what I achieved, I'd never be enough for them. Fine. They didn't have to see my worth. Soon, the entire boardroom would. By Wednesday, I'd finished the polished, sanitized version of the financial disclosure. It painted the exact picture Ryan wanted, a failing company ready to be rescued. At 11:47 a.m., I hit send. Ryan's reply came instantly. Perfect. You're a lifesaver. Hendricks just confirmed our Thursday meeting. Be ready. Be ready. He had no idea how ready I was. That evening, I sat in the quiet office long after everyone left. Through the glass wall, I watched the last of the daylight fade over the factory floor. In that reflection, I could almost see Uncle James again smiling faintly as though he'd known this moment was coming. When the time comes, he'd told me, don't raise your voice. Raise the truth. And tomorrow, that truth would finally echo louder than any of their champagne toasts. Thursday arrived with the kind of stillness that feels like the world is holding its breath. By noon, I'd already gone through my notes 3 times. The real numbers were memorized. The legal documents were ready. The trust papers, James Whitmore's signature, still bold and precise, were tucked into my briefcase like a loaded weapon. I dressed carefully that morning. Dark navy suit, crisp white blouse, hair neatly tied back. Every detail deliberate, restrained, professional. I didn't want to look powerful. I wanted to be it. At 1:30 p.m., I walked into the conference room. Ryan was already there, pacing like an actor rehearsing lines for a play he thought he'd written. Dad sat near the head of the table, calm and confident, while Mom adjusted the flower arrangement in the center like she was preparing for a wedding. Nicole scrolled through her phone, probably updating her followers about big family business moves. Ryan noticed me first. "Paula, you're early," he said, feigning amusement. "We won't need you until Hendrix's team has questions about the financials. Don't worry, I'll give you a cue." I set my folder on the table and met his eyes. "I'll be here from the start." Dad frowned. "Paula, this is a strategic discussion. It's not your place." "Actually," I said quietly, "it's exactly my place." Before either of them could respond, the glass door opened. 3 people entered, 2 men in tailored suits and a woman with a briefcase. The air seemed to tighten around her presence. "Mr. Barnes," she greeted, extending her hand to Dad. "I'm Catherine Hendricks. We spoke on the phone." Dad stood shaking her hand firmly. "A pleasure, Ms. Hendricks. Please have a seat. This is my son Ryan, our COO, and our accountant, Paula." "Head of financial analysis," I corrected mildly, though. Ryan quickly cut in with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Bookkeeper," he said. "She handles reports." Catherine's gaze flicked toward me, curious assessing. "Of course." We all took our seats. Ryan launched into his performance. Barnes Industries has faced market pressures, but this sale gives us stability and partnership. $2 million for full acquisition is fair and reflects current conditions. Catherine nodded. "Based on your disclosures, that's reasonable. However," she flipped through her papers, "some of our research shows your sensor line gaining traction. These numbers here," she pointed, "seem understated." Ryan's smile faltered. "There's always uncertainty in projections," he said. "Small fluctuations. Nothing major." I could almost hear Uncle James's voice in my head. "When they start bluffing, that's your cue." "Actually," I said, standing slowly, "there's a larger picture you haven't seen." Ryan turned sharply. "Paula, sit down." "I won't." Dad's tone hardened. "This is not the time." "It's exactly the time." I connected my tablet to the conference screen. The display blinked to life, illuminating the polished table with numbers, my numbers. "These," I said evenly, "are the real financials of Barnes Industries. Current growth rate, 18% year over year. Pending contracts valued at $4.2 million. Projected annual revenue within 18 months over $12 million. Catherine leaned forward, her pen hovering. "These figures are significantly different from what we received." Ryan's voice rose sharp and panicked. "Paula, what the hell are you doing? You're fired. Get out of this meeting right now." I didn't even flinch. "You can't fire me. I'm the COO." "Yes," I said calmly, "and you own 4% of this company. I own 71." The room went silent. Mom blinked as if she'd misheard me. "That's ridiculous," she said. "You don't own anything." I reached into my folder and placed the documents on the table, one by one, the papers whispering like falling dominoes. 8 years ago, James Whitmore left his 50% stake to me. It was held in trust until I turned 25. I turned 28 this year. 3 years ago, those shares became mine. Ryan's face drained of color. "You're lying." I slid forward another document. 2 years ago, I acquired the Wilson Estates 21% through an LLC that I own. The proof is right here. Catherine examined the papers silently. "These are legitimate," she said. At last, her tone calm but final. "Paula Barnes is the majority shareholder." Dad slumped back in his chair, staring at me as though I'd turned into a stranger. "James left you his shares." "Why?" "Because he knew I'd protect what he built," I said softly. "Not sell it off to the first buyer waving a check." Mom's voice trembled. "Paula, you've deceived us for years." "No," I said. "I've been watching, learning, preparing. You treated me like a bookkeeper while I rebuilt the company from underneath you." Ryan slammed his hand on the table. "You can't block this sale. It's already agreed." "It's not finalized," I replied. "Any sale requires majority shareholder approval, which you don't have, which you'll never have." Catherine closed her folder slowly. "Well, that certainly changes things." She stood turning to me with a measured smile. "For what it's worth, Ms. Barnes, your analysis is impressive. Based on these numbers, this company isn't worth $2 million. It's worth at least $6.5. She extended her business card to me. "If you ever wish to discuss partnerships rather than sales, call me directly." I took it. "I will." She and her team left their footsteps echoing down the corridor like a victory march. Inside the conference room, the silence that followed was unbearable. Ryan's voice finally cracked through it. You ruined everything. No, I said, collecting my papers. I saved everything. Dad's voice was hoarse. You blindsided your own family. I looked at him, the man who told me to stay in my lane my entire life. You built a company, Dad. But you never built a family. You built a hierarchy, and now it's over. Nicole burst into tears. Mom reached for her. Ryan stood, fists clenched. I pressed the intercom button. Michael, you can come in now. The door opened. Our corporate attorney, Michael Brooks, stepped inside, followed by Marcus Chin and 3 senior employees. Each held a document. Paula Michael said the board resolutions you requested are ready. Ryan's eyes widened. What resolutions? The new board appointments, I said. Effective immediately, Ryan Barnes is removed as COO. The new CEO of Barnes Industries is me. Dad's voice rose. You can't. I can, and I have. The papers hit the table with finality. The sound was louder than Ryan's shouting, louder than Mom's sobs. For the first time in my life, my voice didn't shake. This company is mine, I said quietly. And starting today, I'm taking it back. The moment I left that conference room, I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated, free. Instead, the hallway air felt heavy, thick, with the echoes of everything that had just broken. My family's voices still rang behind the closed doors, Ryan's furious shouting, Mom's choked sobs, Dad's stunned silence. Even through the glass, I could see their faces, a portrait of disbelief. For 28 years, they'd told me I didn't understand the big picture. Now, they were finally looking at it. When I reached my office, Marcus Chin was waiting there. His eyes searched mine, half astonished, half proud. He began struggling to find words. Necessary, I finished for him. It was necessary. He let out a slow breath. They'll never forgive you. I gave a tired smile. They never saw me long enough to forgive me. Michael Brooks, our attorney, appeared behind Marcus, a stack of signed documents in hand. Everything's official, he said. The board transition is registered. The majority vote has been filed with the state. Legally, you are now the CEO of Barnes Industries. Hearing it said aloud sent a chill through me. CEO. 3 letters that weighed more than I'd ever imagined. Thank you, Michael. He hesitated at the door. You did what most people spend a lifetime too afraid to do, stand up to blood. Then, after a beat, just remember power isolates. When he left, Marcus lingered. What happens now? Now, I said, glancing toward the factory windows where late sunlight spilled across silent machines. Now we rebuild from the inside out. That evening, I called an emergency meeting with the senior staff. They came in quietly, faces wary. Some had heard rumors. Others had witnessed the showdown firsthand. I stood at the head of the long table where Ryan had so often performed his arrogance. You've probably heard what happened today, I began. Yes, there's been a leadership change. Effective immediately, I am assuming the role of CEO. Murmurs rippled through the room. I know this company has been run on ego and favoritism for too long. That ends tonight. From now on, promotions will come from performance, not last names. Work will be measured by results, not loyalty. A hand rose from the far end, Patricia Wu, our senior accountant. What about the Barnes family members still on payroll? Ryan's employment is terminated unless he accepts a reassignment as sales associate under Marcus. Nicole's consulting contract is suspended. Dad's monthly advisory stipend is canceled. A few people exchanged glances, half disbelief, half admiration. Any questions? Marcus spoke up, his voice steady. Just one. What do you want from us, Paula? I met his gaze. Honesty, hard work. No more pretending. We're not just surviving anymore. We're going to grow. For a moment, silence reigned. Then slowly, Patricia began to clap. One by one, others joined in until the room was filled with cautious applause, the sound of something new being born. But later that night, when the applause was gone and the lights were off, the cost of what I'd done began to settle in. I sat alone in my office, the city lights flickering through the blinds. On my desk lay a framed photo of my family before all this. Ryan smiling with champagne. Nicole in her sequined dress, Mom leaning against Dad's shoulder. I was barely visible in the corner of the shot laptop in hand, half turned away. A perfect metaphor. The photo had once hurt to look at. Tonight it only felt like closure. There was a knock on the door. Come in, I said. Marcus stepped inside. You should go home. It's past midnight. I don't really have a home to go back to tonight, I said quietly. Not anymore. He didn't say anything, just stood beside me, looking out at the empty factory floor. You did the right thing, he said finally, but it's okay if it doesn't feel like it yet. Do you think they'll ever speak to me again? He shrugged gently, Maybe. After they stop seeing you as the problem and start seeing you as the solution. I gave a small, weary laugh. That might take a while. He smiled faintly. Then we'll keep building until they notice. When he left, I turned off the desk lamp and sat in the darkness for a long moment. Somewhere deep inside, the ache of guilt fought with the quiet satisfaction of justice. For years, they'd silenced me with doubt. Now the silence belonged to me, and it was powerful. Before leaving, I looked once more at Uncle James's portrait on the wall. His eyes seemed to follow me, steady approving. "You were right," I whispered. "Sometimes to protect what matters, you have to burn the illusion first." I locked the office door behind me. Tomorrow I'd face my family again. Not as their daughter, not as their sister, but as the woman who owned everything they took for granted. A year passed. The building that had once echoed with tension now hummed with the steady rhythm of purpose. Where confusion and favoritism used to breed resentment, there was now structure, ambition, and pride. Barnes Industries had become something it hadn't been in years, alive. The company floor was busier than ever. 80 employees had grown to 95. The new sensor line, once dismissed as a gamble, had taken off beyond projections. Contracts rolled in. Bonuses were earned, not handed out as favors, but achieved through merit. I walked through the corridor that morning, coffee in hand, greeting faces that used to avoid eye contact. They greeted me now with respect, not fear. "Morning, Ms. Barnes," one of the younger technicians said as I passed. "Morning, Ethan," I replied, and I meant it. When I entered my office, Marcus was already waiting with a folder. "Quarterly reports," he said with a grin. "Revenue's up another 14%. Tecton renewed their contract early." I took the folder smiling. "And employee satisfaction. Highest since the company was founded," he said. "You've built something real, Paula." I looked out the window, watching the factory lights flicker like stars. "We built it," I said softly. It was true. Marcus had become more than my right hand, he was the pulse of the company. Patricia, now CFO, had brought a level of integrity and discipline the company had never known. Together, we'd redefined what Barnes Industries meant. And somewhere I hoped Uncle James would have been proud. That afternoon, I was reviewing new partnership proposals when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it until something in me hesitated. "Paula Barnes," I answered. A pause, then a familiar voice. "Paula, it's Dad." For a moment, I couldn't speak. It had been over a year since we'd last spoken. The sound of his voice cracked something I hadn't realized was still fragile. "I saw the news," he continued. "The IPO, 22 million valuation. That's remarkable." I leaned back in my chair, eyes on the skyline. "It's what the company was always worth. You just couldn't see it." He exhaled long and heavy. "I know. And I was wrong. About you. About everything. I wanted to call and say I'm proud of you." Proud. That word so small, but it hit me like a wave. I'd imagined hearing it 1,000 times, but never like this over a phone line from miles away when everything had already changed. "I appreciate that," I said quietly. "Your mother misses you," he said. "We both do." "She misses what she used to control," I replied, before I could stop myself. Then softer. "Maybe one day we'll talk, but not yet." He was silent for a moment. "Fair enough," he said. "I deserve that." Before hanging up, he added, almost whispering, "James was right to trust you. You were always meant to lead." When the call ended, I sat there for a while, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. I didn't feel angry anymore. Just done. That evening, I went home and pulled out a framed letter, the one I'd kept since the day James died. The paper was yellowed at the edges now, but his handwriting was still strong and certain. "Paula, if you're reading this, then the time has come for you to decide what kind of leader you'll be. Remember, leadership isn't about being loud. It's about being prepared when others are blind. You don't owe loyalty to arrogance, only to truth. And when your moment arrives, take it without apology. Love, Uncle James." I smiled through the tears that finally came. "I took it, Uncle James," I whispered, and I didn't apologize. 3 months later, I stood on a stage at the annual shareholder meeting. The banner behind me read, "Barnes Industries, 2 years of renewal." Employees filled the auditorium clapping as I stepped up to the microphone. Cameras flashed. Investors lined the back wall. This company I began was once defined by legacy, by who started it, by whose name it carried. But legacies fade when they aren't nurtured. What we've built together isn't about one name. It's about everyone who believes that respect, merit, and hard work should decide who sits at this table. Applause erupted. We've grown from 72 employees to 140. Our value has multiplied tenfold. And we did it not by changing who we are, but by remembering who we could be. I caught Marcus's proud grin from the front row. Patricia nodded, eyes shining. When the meeting ended, employees crowded around, shaking my hand, thanking me. Someone handed me a small plaque they'd made, "The Leader Who Listened." Later, when the crowd dispersed, I stayed on the empty stage, the lights dimmed. For a long time, I stared at that plaque and thought of everything it had cost to get here. The loneliness, the loss, the years of invisibility. And then I thought of that night in the living room, champagne spilling on the carpet, Ryan laughing as they toasted his brilliance. He'd tried to sell our company for $2 million. Now, under my leadership, it was worth $22 million and rising. I wasn't the loudest voice in the room. I never had been. But silence, I'd learned, can be the sharpest blade. Because when you finally choose to speak, everyone listens.